Thank you, everybody, first of all, and good evening. It's in Italy, it's 9:30, and I would like to start saying just a few words about the title. We changed a bit the title, and the new one, different from the program, is Taking Back Control, Securing the Enforcement of Labor Standards in Public Supply Chains, given that the focus of this presentation is still part of the same Procure project coordinated by CRIMT. We'll focus specifically on enforcement experimentation, enforcement innovative practices to ensure decent working conditions in public procurement practices. And beyond me, that is starting this presentation, and Bjarke, Refslund from Aalborg University. I would like to thank our colleagues that contributed to collecting the material for this presentation that belong to the project and that contributed to prepare this presentation. Lisa Dorigatti from University of Milan, Karen, who is there in present, and Trine Larsen from the University of Copenhagen. We started our observing that paradoxically, the widening of the opportunities for legal exit option for employers triggered by the degradation of the labor market has not decreased their willingness and their intention to reduce evasion. On the contrary, instead, the regulation and the fragmentation of the labor market and employment regulation have instead facilitated the rule evasion, so the evasion of labor standards and labor law. And this is also true, and especially true for our project, in outsourcing of public services. Indeed, via outsourcing, public authority try to externalize the immediate responsibility to ensure decent working conditions and to ensure compliance with labor law to their own direct employees. Furthermore, this limited liability of the public authorities is further exacerbated by the fact that as the literature has widely documented, in private contractors, in private organizations to which the provision of public services is contracted out are generally characterized by weak unionization rate, certainly weaker, lower than the public sector, a wider use of discretion in terms of non-compliance with the labor standards, and generally the absence of worker representatives in charge of monitoring the compliance with the labor law and the enforcement of labor standards at the workplaces. On the other side, public authorities somehow complain the information asymmetry they suffered from, saying that they lack information on their side about how work is actually performed, awarded, and paid in a private contractor. But this narration somehow seems to be a justification of their hands-off approach of public buyers, meaning trying to hide the lack of capacity or the weak capacity to actually enforce controls at the workplace to ensure decent working conditions in these contracting companies. So overall, what we observe in the literature in the previous project just mentioned in the previous presentation, what is getting increasing importance in Europe is the goal to ensure decent working conditions, decent working publicly supply chain. Indeed, public authorities are trying to become good buyers, buying decent work by applying and expanding the use of procurement-specific policies and practices to try to compensate this gap and these weaknesses reported both in the employment relations system as well as in the weaknesses of the associational governance within private companies. As a result, their general attempt, on which we are interested to explore in depth, is the effort to try to take back control over the enforcement of labor standards, since they acknowledge that securing the enforcement of labor laws and standards set in collective agreements is crucial to exploit public procurement practices as a way to improve standards within this externalized segment of the public services. The traditional way to secure good working conditions is the use, as already reported in previous presentation, the use of labor clauses. But anyhow, we observe via our empirical field and previous literature that there is a variety of enforcement models which are strongly dependent upon the dialectical relationship between the state capacity to enforce the standard, these labor clauses on the one hand, and the strength of union within each country in which they are embedded. Of course, the regulatory framework, the employment relations system in which they operate, they move, is fundamental for setting opportunity and constraints to enforce these rules. The literature, very briefly, provides some insight on this mutual relationship between the state capacity, and the associational government in regulating employment by drawing let's say, observing a sort of coming back of the state, a return of the state, where the associational governance is weakening. Overall, we observe in this enforcing attempt set up by public authorities a mixture of regulation where different actors, a variable geometry of actors, intervene and operate between the state authority, the state agency, and the unions. And the picture is further complicated by the fact that procurement practices somehow weaken further the associational governance. On the one hand, because a third party that is external to traditional bilateral employment relations and negotiation arena jump in, towards which unions have a limited voice and capacity to negotiate. While on the other side, public procurement practices put a lot of financial pressure via a downward pressure and competition based on cost. So moving quickly to our empirical findings, based on the result of this Procure Fair project, our paper aims to discuss what are the main potential, the challenges, and the limitation of these attempts that we observed, that we investigated across different countries to take back control of rule enforcement in publicly financed jobs. We focus on the two industries considering the project, the security services and the industrial cleaning, across three different countries, three different institutional frameworks, Denmark, Italy, and Germany. I'll just move quickly to the first model of enforcement that we observed in Italy. Enforcement in Italy is not based on the role played by public enforcement unit, public control unit, but rather via a new experimentation, interactive experimentation observed at the regional level. We observed several initiatives set up especially in two regions, Tuscany in the center of Italy and Emilia-Romagna in the north of Italy, where the local regional government, together with the regional purchasing authority and the main confederal trade union, CGIL e CISL, signed this protocol that in Tuscany then was converted into a law that is generally binding for all public authorities, while in Emilia-Romagna is binding only for regional procurement practices, whereby they try to set permanent negotiation table where union can try to enforce standards and ensure that labor standards are respected by private contractor. How do these protocols work? Substantially, they work in similar ways. During an ex-ante phase, the regional government, when drafting the tender, is compulsory, has to compulsory convene to this permanent negotiation table the private contractors as well as the trade union to negotiate the social clauses to include in the tender, consultation on the standard to be applied in the tender as a way to prevent the use of standard that might constitute an obstacle to the respect of employment standards. So somehow pre-qualifying the labor standards set in the tenders to which private contractors have to comply with during this ex-ante phase. And this is what actually occurs in both the cases. Furthermore, in the experimental case of Tuscany, via this permanent negotiation table, in an ex-ante ex-post controlling phase, the trade union can also use and report to this negotiation table all the issues and the criticism arising during the application of the contract in terms of labor violation and lack of enforcement of labor standards in the contract. via this table, unions have to confront with the public contracting authority and the private contractor, and in this way try to enforce the standard.
All right, I'll take over from here. And hello, everyone, and thank you, Anna. I guess I'll try to be brief. I don't think we have much time, but I'll try to focus on the main points. But
got about 5.5 minutes, Bjarke.
All right, that's perfect. I think let's see if I can do. Thanks. So I'll just say a bit about the use of labor clauses and inspection in Denmark. So in Denmark, the debate has moved quite generally from whether we should have labor clauses in public procured work to how do we actually enforce it. It's mandatory for state authorities to use labor clauses, but only voluntary for municipalities. So the debate has much gone in that direction of how do we actually make sure that this is not only a sort of a paper tiger, but it actually also is enforced on the ground. And this, of course, as Anna already said, links to the union or industrial relations systems, because the union, of course, can detect problems, but they don't have a direct legal claim in terms of the labor clause, because they don't necessarily oblige the buyer or the suppliers to sign a collective agreement. So there's an issue here about enforcement, and there's definitely been cases also in Denmark where there has been pure or precarious working conditions. So we look at in the case studies at two different examples of enforcements. Both of them are actual administrative enforcement units that control and sanction suppliers. So the one of them is run by the state, and the other one is run by 10 municipalities jointly that on an island that's gone together and started this control unit. So they do both desk research, desk inspection, so to speak, run numbers and wages, etc. for checks, but they also do site visits to see if the actual labor clauses are actually met on the ground. So this means that there's both a preventive effect, that some of the most dubious companies will probably stay away from actually bidding, but also that there is sort of a policy learning. There are other municipalities that are trying to do the same. It's partly political driven by social democrats and left-wing parties in these bigger cities, but there's generally also a more political interest in this. All right, if you can change the slide, Anna. Maybe just in the Danish case, they've conducted, I guess, plus 300 inspections at the state unit, and found in at least, I think it's in 70% of them, they found breaches. So it's quite effective, and it actually unravels problems. Then I also have to say a bit.
I think we've not that much time left, and perhaps I can.
All right. Sure. All right. Yeah. I don't say anything about the German case. Then we can talk about it, or you can ask Karen in the break about the Berlin case with enforcement. But I will just try to round up. Then I guess this is how far we've gotten so far. That as Anna already stated, we had an expectation that there would be sort of a variety of enforcement models. This is also what we see. So on the ground, not only nationally, but also even regionally or at the city level, which we have also seen in previous research. But I think a main argument here is that this really relates to, of course, the industrial relations systems and the legal systems, but also very strongly to the overall regulatory frame, if you can say so. So the sort of combined capacity of state actors and the voluntary system to actually enforce these various procurement-specific minimum wages or collective agreements that are sort of made compulsory for the suppliers. So in that sense, we hope that this work can help illuminate some of these changes that are going on in the regulation and the enforcement of sort of on the ground enforcement of labor standards, and also contribute to discussion what is then the role of the state. As Anna also said in the introduction, we see a changing roles of the state once the.
Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here, but did you miss me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
You can. Anna can hear me, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Do they hear me? I
don't know when.
We can hear you. Just a little.
All right.
Everything seems to be okay. Please, sorry.
Sure. Maybe, but let me just finish off. So saying that of course, this also talks into the literature about what role does the state take on when we see, for instance, declining union strength and changes in the industrial relations system. And there's definitely variety there as well, where in Italy the union or the state is a bit more hesitant and the union has to push for it. And in Denmark it is a bit more of a compensatory role, whereas in the German case there is a lot of issues about administrative and bureaucratic measures of who is actually controlling the labor clauses, etc. So I think I'll just leave it there, and we'll just have a few minutes for some comments and questions.